NBA is suspending the season. I say that understanding that as we speak, the game in Dallas is continuing.
NBA. I can rearrange those letters and spell ban. Now I write down NFL. Looks like flu. Major League Baseball, MLB. That's just BLM by another name. HE double hockey sticks. Welcome to it. It's the NHL. You're going to kneel. Before who? You going to take a knee? I'm not interested actually in playing that game. I want to talk about what I'm referring to here in the developing events, which seem to map onto the portrait of American society that I painted a number of years ago when I speculated about what would happen if the manufactured polarization by the media monopoly continued. And I think we're looking at it right now. Consider that roughly about 1% of the American population are sociopaths, and young violent men are overrepresented in that 1%. So out of, say, 3.5 million, over half are violent sociopathic young men. So that's well over 2 million violent sociopathic men if you include people that are on and off the books as citizens. And these people combined are a highly programmable minority that is given attention. They get into law enforcement, they climb the corporate ladder, and they're also sitting around in Antifa gear and other types of tribalized logos that identify whatever kind of polarized political ideology they've subscribed to, which is nothing more than a platform to springboard them into chaos out in the public. I've been talking about this for 6 years, and everything I seem to have predicted has happened except for the Boston and Chicago events, which might be race-related or terrorism-related. So we're living in the hyperpolarized world in which the game is a movable game. It's an infinite game, and we can shut down the stadiums but keep playing the game. The NBA power rankings. 22 teams are going to, they're going to restart the season. I wonder if they're going to be restarting a different kind of game that's being played at large, as well as the NBA games of basketball. Basketball was created in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is now one of the 2 white minority cities in the East Coast. There's not a lot of them. In New England. So Holyoke and Springfield, Massachusetts in Western Mass. Birthplace of volleyball, Holyoke and Springfield. Birthplace of basketball. Those 2 cities are hotspots for co-creative activity that seems to map onto patterns for the rest of the country. This happens in California too. So you'll see a trend come out of Massachusetts and California, and it spreads across the country. Massachusetts and California and New York usually get there first, legislatively as well as culturally. If you take the names of the first 3 NBA players who were tested positive with COVID-19, you can get some very interesting anagrams, including COVID chlorination turns the warm-blooded edgy, and COVID turns my chlorination red, go death blow. We can rearrange that for a few different sentences. COVID chlorination ed turns God blameworthy. We're seeing an anti-Pentecostal symbolism in which we're to worship science, which is going to save us from this plague, a plague that doesn't exist. So the mandatory vaccinations are hinted at in these anagrams, and I spelled it out explicitly in March 14th in a video to the Unified Code Theory page entitled Mandatory Vaccinations and Quarantines. And I use some predictive programming sampling from Hollywood entertainments, which have psychologically primed the masses to accept the future that's on the books and planned. So reality isn't so much scripted, so much as the scripts increase the probabilities that certain events that are desired will happen if we collectively worship those events in symbol on the silver screen. So seeking revenge for the Russians, having the Chinese come down in Red Dawn and get us. All of these entertainments we've absorbed and worshipped are embedded with, in an eerie way, it's been pointed out by thousands of people on the internet, from The Simpsons to Back to the Future and in between. There's a lot of stuff in here that seems to be both biblical and happening right now.
You can do pooled testing of large numbers of people together in one shot. You can get community people to get boots on the ground.
Where? Get in the car!
My interpretations of the eerie predictive symbolism in media entertainments and pop culture in general is a bit different than what the so-called truth community has suggested. I don't believe reality is scripted, and I don't believe there's a group or an Illuminati that has to disclose to us what they want to do. That's a paradigm that keeps getting repeated by people who are quantifiably criminal in their behavior and supporting the chaos and deracination of American culture on YouTube. This is an information war we're in, a Cold War, and the so-called truther community is part of a terrorist organization, kind of like a Shin Bet or Mossad operation, designed to deracinate American society and promote a distrust in law enforcement and government as well as in each other, and cultivate an overall state of distrust. And the division comes on many lines. Race is a really easy one. The feminism is also another excellent motivator. We see that the Me Too movement was started by the actor also known as KRS-One. I was speaking about this a couple years ago, the meme think infection and the meme man embedded in some of KRS-One's music that predicts the Me Too movement. Me Too was also predicted by the drunk with a golden voice, Ted Williams, on the Jimmy Fallon show. So KRS-One doesn't just look like Tarana Burke, he is. And they have matching crooked teeth and then some. If it's a hologram, then they cut and pasted KRS-One's code to create Tarana Burke. Nonetheless, here I am a couple years ago reposting a video last September about infections and breakouts and TP for your bunghole and Nazis in America. And it kind of sounds like a scattershot nonsense to a skeptic person who doesn't want to believe this. But for 6 years, the crazy things I've said have involved predictions based on patterns, and those predictions have come true, from Super Bowl scores to mass shootings to elections to, meme think infections. And I was showing you Sophia with the gas masks last October. So there's different ways in which a seer like myself can show you what's happening. Meanwhile, well-funded, very well-distributed, popular so-called truthers and wannabe mainstream media presenting quasi-alt opinions or downright mainstream-funded conspiracy theories like the QAnon seem to be destroying illusions here by making COVID a lighthearted subject and then telling people 2 days after I warned of the mandatory quarantines and vaccine codes, they have one of their guys coming out here with his leather jacket and his blonde hair and blue eyes telling people that it's a fake rumor, whatever that means. That's nonsensical language that subtly embeds a built-in kind of cognitive dissonance. Is it a rumor or is it fake? Which one? Anyway, nonetheless, America throwing in the towel, deracination of the family, and the dissolution of American sovereignty all seem to be up on the table if the predictive programming plays out the way it has for decades. Meanwhile, wannabe male models are telling people in quasi-truther media to just look at it like, hey, here's how to fight about it. Pro-maskers are the new pro-vaxxers. So we're just going to keep up the same ideological battles, divide people up, and continue arguments while our country's being deracinated and national sovereignty is being broken up. So I've predicted mandatory quarantines, a second wave, and then terrorism and a financial collapse amidst massive polarization based on race-bait media, in which an incredibly small minority, let's say there's 4 times as many sociopaths, 400% more sociopaths in law enforcement than in society. That'd be 4% of police are sociopaths. Meanwhile, the 96 other percent of police are either enabling these people or stuck in a system where silence is almost mandated in this kind of quasi-brotherhood of law enforcement. And they're just as propagandized and polarized as we are. And they're funded by the state. These people are on a state paycheck like school teachers, and they put themselves out in harm's way to better the community very often. There's a lot of honorable reasons someone might be motivated to become a police officer, but it's also a job that's very attractive to violent sociopaths. And shame on us for not screening these people out of the police department. And then believing the media when the media focuses on the shitstorm they're inevitably going to cause in some city. And then that becomes the platform through which all white men are viewed somehow. So this is where we get back to the game. This is literally a kind of sociopathic, almost artificial intelligence war against humanity. And we're being divided up because we're easy to take out in smaller groups that can't cooperate, right? It's literally Red Sox or Yankees in this country. If you're with the Red Sox, you're not with the Yankees. So if you say something that Team Red Sox says, then you can't be on Team Yankees for another subject. It's literally all or nothing. Pardon the pun, it's black and white more than it's ever been. And this is what I believe are the Nephilim games. And Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, told us that preparing for the Super Bowl is a lot like studying Talmud. He didn't just say that for shits and giggles. It means something. And this is a guy who's won more Super Bowls than you have. Maybe he knows what he's talking about. So I think we're looking at the empire, the burning of the man in the middle. So if you look at the slave trade records, it seems like a small elite minority of Ashkenazis who consider themselves to be people of color ran the slave trade, and now people like me get blamed for it. My French ancestors came into this country and openly mixed with black people in Louisiana, and that's why the Creole speaks some French. Not because there was French slavers, but because they got down with dark meat. No, I'm serious. They make jokes about it, but the French got down differently. They went up north and mixed with the Cree and Blackfoot Indians, and that's where my Métis ancestors came from. My white ancestors on the French side never owned any slaves. They mixed well with the colored, and their cultures still exist. Those mixed cultures carved out their own place. We need to put away childish things. We're getting tickled into thinking that somebody has something we don't have, but we can get it if it's just given to us because stuff's unfair. Really, that everybody gets a trophy is just one step away from Marxism, communism, and the embedded cognitive dissonance in the media is also increasing this kind of low-lying vibe of nihilism. Like everybody's crazy and stupid on the media. I think that represents a small minority of us. And that minority, like I said, is being given the spotlight. So even if there's 400% more sociopaths in the police force, that's still 96% of cops aren't violent sociopaths. Why are we acting like they all are? That doesn't map onto my experience. And I'll remind you, I'm someone that currently has a civil rights lawsuit against the city of Broomfield, for police brutality. I am still in pain right now as I narrate this video from an attack by a correctional officer. I know exactly what police brutality looks and feels like. I can feel it in my fucking damaged skull right now. But I'm telling you, that kind of antisocial, violent, sociopathic behavior represents a small minority of us that are being framed by the media as representing all of us. That shit ain't my bag, man.
This can be the team for us. He said, if I can get you to see what I'm seeing, to dream what I'm dreaming, we can get there. We can win it. This can be the team.
My goal, what I want to do each year, is to win a national championship. I want to cut the nets down. We have one practice every year where they come up on a court. There's no balls. There's no drills. All we do is practice cutting the net down. It's true. I have a scissor. I have a gold scissor. We carry each other up. We cut the net. They pick me up. I cut the last one. We do that.
We was acting like, yeah, we just won. And everybody's cutting down the nets and everything. But it was a serious deal.
Let's take a look at esoteric information embedded in patterns that are seemingly hidden in plain sight to us. We're going to need our compass. We've been disoriented. So we've been kicked out of Eden. We're east of Eden, possibly. Disoriented. We don't know where we are, if we've been kicked out of paradise or if we're still in paradise. Paradise, which is a walled garden, kind of like a purgatory. Not the garden, the garden or paradisi in the Bible is not heaven. It's more like a purgatory holding cell before a judgment day. That might be where we are now. The Catholics might describe our situation as more of a purgatory. That could explain why simulation and hologram theory seem to be so popular today. because the world we're living in isn't the world of old, but something different. And maybe it happened in the blink of an eye, and our eyes were sewn shut. We didn't see what happened. It's because we were paying attention to the news. We've got the Wall Street Journal versus the social justice warriors. We're being disoriented. We have our eyes sewn shut, north, south, east, west. Now in Genesis 3:24, Adam and Eve are kicked out of the garden, out of paradisi, and they're moved east. So they're disoriented. Perhaps part of that disorientation comes with the flaming sword and the cherubim. Perhaps that flaming sword is like the smoke and mirrors of the media coming from the Ashkenazi Jewish monopoly. So we have eyes shown wide shut and a disorientation. We're still in the garden, so we haven't been kicked out of the garden so much as kicked out of our awareness of the garden. East of Eden is just more Eden, because Eden is forever, possibly. And moving the east around, or having a false sense of east, of center, is literally a disorientation. This is where disorientation comes from. And if we see the net, the internet, as creating this false divide, we could literally look at this compass and these cardinal directions and see the net as symbolically also part of a game of tennis. The net in basketball is symbolic as well. This goes back to the Native American games of hoop and spear, but they're all games nonetheless being played here. So this idea of being removed from Eden in Genesis 3:24 is prominently featured in the movie The Fountain, slept-on masterpiece from Aronofsky, which begins with the story of Adam and Eve being kicked out of the garden. So perhaps the cherubim with the flaming sword created the illusion, and now Adam and Eve are to restore the garden out in the east. Maybe they just got moved into a less maintained part of the garden, and they've got to bring it back to life. So perhaps they got to remember where they come from, remember their roots, and tap into something, create another section of the garden. So I would say that it's not so much getting back to the garden as remembering you're still there, and the illusion of being cast out of the garden is within the mind. And so the power of Adam and Eve believing that exile is what makes it a reality. And the Gnostic awakening from the Spirit of God is what brings the remembrance of the good spell, the gospel. That's the original word. Also known as the Q document to theologians of the New Testament. There's an alleged Q document by an anonymous source. So when we see Hillary Clinton and other mainstream media people making a punching bag out of the QAnon conspiracy theory phenomenon, we see how some of this can map out into the manufactured polarization in the media and then go right back to the Bible. The other Q document could be the Quran, which has 114 surahs, and the Gospel of Thomas is considered to be the Q document also, and that has 114 chapters, and that 114 number reminds me of 411 in the information, and that information has been symbolically reversed with the 114 surahs and chapters of the Thomas, the twin gospel, and the Quran. So we have the Q document, and the QAnon document. Lots of questions and very few answers. So those answers are coming in the form of the Gnostic awakening, which is like a Pentecostal arrival, which ends our disorientation.
Hey. Don't get all testy with him just because you got a problem with your station in life.
Oh, I'm secure with what I do.
Then just say it. You're a tracer. I'm not gonna let that see you fucking tracer!
I'll trace a chocolate around your dead fucking body, you fuck!
Would you get him out of here? Hey, wait a second! He's your me! You fucking tracer!
Your mother's a tracer!
Can I explain the audience principle to you? If you insult and accost him, then we have no audience.
He started it, fucking cock knocker! It's lucky I didn't put my pen through its thorax!
Need I remind you? Curtains in 10 minutes. Okay? Look, you're my best friend, so don't take this the wrong way. In 20 years, if you're still living here, coming over my house to watch the Patriots game, still working construction, I'll fucking kill you.
No fooling.
What?
You're playing with your life now.
Oh, fuck my life, fuck my life. I want the credit, the credit. Do you know what the New York Times said about my last picture? They call it a thrill ride for the ages, but they didn't mention the producer. They talked about the costumes, but they never talked about the producer. Do you know what that picture grossed? And I'll understand here, and let some limp dick film school pansy take the credit. What? Oh,
You
bullshit.
can't do it.
Don't you tell me that. Don't you ever tell me that. I'm the producer of the show. If I didn't step up, you're nowhere. I put this thing together out of spit and polish. Look at that. That is a complete fucking fraud, and it looks 100% real. What the New York Times said about my last picture, they call it a thrill ride for the ages, but they didn't mention the producer. They talked about the costumes, but they never talked about the producer. Do you know what that picture grossed? And I'll understand here, and let some limp dick film school pansy take the credit. What? Oh,
You
bullshit.
can't do it.
Don't you tell me that. Don't you ever tell me that. I'm the producer of the show. If I didn't step up, you're nowhere. I put this thing together out of spit and polish. Look at that. That is a complete fucking fraud, and it looks 100% real.
Big question is, how much will this scandal affect the outcome?
We're the fighting men of the 303. 303.
Look at that. That is a complete fucking fraud. I put this thing together out of spit and polish. Look at that. That is a complete fucking fraud.
Snap out of it!
I can't.
I don't think we're doing very well for a number of reasons, not all of which is the fault of the system. What's even more confounding is that when you have a community-based outbreak, like's going on right now in several states, Florida, California, Texas, Arizona, etc., what you're seeing is community-based spread where 20 to 40% of the people who are infected don't have any symptoms. So the standard classic paradigm of identification, isolation, contact tracing doesn't work no matter how good you are, because you don't know who you're tracing. They're out there, they don't even know that they're infected. So as I mentioned a few times recently, one of the things that we are considering doing is completely blanketing these communities with tests to get a feel for what the penetrance is in the community of infection. You can do that by a number of ways. You can do pooled testing of large numbers of people together in one shot. You can get community people to get boots on the ground and to go out there and look for the people instead of getting on a phone and doing so-called contact tracing by phone.
Wild bird feed?
Yes, but I don't want to give them seeds and bird feeds that's going to make them attack anybody near my home.